Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy, and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health, one topic at a time. Yeah, here I am, no makeup today, but very bundled up. It's so cold here. I know for those of you who live like not in the Sun Belt like me, probably this isn't cold. It's really cold to us. It's in the 40s. Actually, at night it's been going down to the high 30s, and I think we're going to have a high of like 50 today. So anyway, I wasn't really planning to get on camera, so you can see like I've got no makeup on or anything, but I've just decided I want to share with you my evolving viewpoint, my quickly evolving viewpoint on hormone replacement therapy. So for those of you who've been watching my channel, I've recently been diagnosed with osteoporosis, and among other things that I was going to put in my arsenal and have put, namely Algical's Algical Plus supplement and Algical's collagen supplement. I already do resistance training, but I've kind of stepped that up in a few different ways. It's not completely in place yet, but I also decided I was going to be open to hormone replacement therapy. I'm sort of at the tail end of the group of people that were denied hormone replacement therapy early, like during perimenopause and into very early menopause, because the Women's Health Initiative was sort of misinterpreted, and I think we now know that it was overcalled, which is the way my GYN doctor puts it. We overcalled it. So because there were certain, I think they said a 25% increased risk of breast cancer in some groups of women on hormones, there was this decision that it just became widespread that we just don't prescribe hormones almost for any reason anymore. Now, there were a few problems with that. One is that the Women's Health Initiative looked at women in different decades, so in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s, etc. And the other thing is the raw numbers don't really sound as striking as the percentages. So 25% increase, well, how many? So it turns out that a 25% increase in the group that did have it, an increased risk of breast cancer, and it was a group taking a combination estrogen and progesterone, although back in those decades we were not using what we're using now, the bioidenticals. The difference was 4 versus 5 in 1,000. So your chance was 4 in 1,000, or your chance is 5 in 1,000 if you were receiving the hormones. So when you think about it that way, it doesn't, the absolute risk really doesn't sound so startling, but the difference between 4 and 5 is 25%. So I think they did overcall it. But I had the opportunity to sit and listen to a podcast today. I'm going to try to find it and link it down below with this video. It was with Dr. Peter Attia, who I really like. But he was interviewing one of the principal investigators in the Women's Health Initiative, and they kind of got into it a couple of times. Now, this is a very long interview, so I would suggest if you watch it that you put the playing speed on higher, so it'll sound like they're talking really fast, but it's a long time, and you might have to split it up into sessions to listen to it. But it was really interesting because after I listened to that interview, I walked away with a more measured view of hormones. Like maybe a week or two ago, I sort of bought into this, well, the Women's Health Initiative is not really something that we should extrapolate too much from, because first of all, they didn't have bioidentical hormones, and it doesn't seem that bioidentical hormones pose these problems. And second of all, the issue that I just said, which is absolute risk, it doesn't really it's not quite as alarming as hearing a 25% increase. A risk of 5 in 1,000 versus 4 in 1,000 it sounds like that might be a risk you're willing to take. The other thing is it didn't change mortality from breast cancer. A lot of breast cancers now are really curable, so not that I want to go through it. So I think commensurate with that, it's now kind of in vogue that we throw everything out about the Women's Health Initiative, throw the whole baby out with the bathwater, and hormones are the be-all, end-all, and they're wonderful, and everybody should be on hormone replacement for their entire life with bioidentical hormones. That's kind of what I'm gathering from this. And she's saying, not so fast. And she sounded very measured to me. And they got into it a little bit on osteoporosis, which for me is the reason I'm going to be taking it. And I am going to be taking it, but I'll tell you how I might take it and how I might change what my plan originally was. They got into it a little bit on that, where Dr. Peter Attia argued with her a bit, saying, you know, you also have to think about the mortality associated with fracture risk, and people who get on hormone replacement therapy early enough, like in premenopause, you protect all these women against hip fractures, and that is a very significant difference in terms of mortality. would have been in your study anyway. And she said, well, not so fast. We have to look at the data. First of all, we don't have any long-term data on using hormone replacement therapy, albeit transdermals and things that seem much safer, but bioidentical hormones. We don't have any long-term studies, large clinical trials using those for decades at a time. And so just because we overcalled it on the Women's Health Initiative doesn't mean that it's perfectly safe to go forward and use those hormones for life. We really don't know that. And the transdermals do seem to reduce certain risks that become the issues later in life, like strokes and heart attacks and things like that, because they bypass the liver. But if you have a uterus and you take those estrogens, you're still taking some kind of progesterone. So this is all, a lot of guessing. And the other thing that she said that was very persuasive was, osteoporosis, the loss of bone, there's a very fast loss of bone early in menopause. And then it kind of tapers off, and unless you do some things and are kind of lucky, you will continue to lose bone, but it's very fast in those first few years after menopause. So if you delay that by using a patch and progesterone, depending on whether you have a uterus, and replace your hormones for that purpose, then you will delay that bone loss. That bone will still be pretty dense. But as soon as you stop using those things, you'll have that rapid bone loss. It will just take place a little bit later. I mean, that might be good because you're still ahead of the curve then. But her point is that it kind of commits you to a lifetime. And we don't have any good studies on that. And we do have, from the Women's Health Initiative, we do know that the women in their 70s, those were the people who were at the highest risk for taking hormone replacement. They had an all-cause mortality rate that was significantly higher than women who were younger. And they, granted, they were taking the oral synthetic estrogens and progesterones that we're not using anymore, but that's all the data we have. Because again, we don't have any kind of studies where people are using the things that we're using today. So all of this is to say that I think my opinion is becoming a little more nuanced, and I'm noticing that practitioners, I know this in the field anyway from all my years in work, things seem to come and go in vogue. And it's like, for this decade, we were all doing this, and this was the panacea for everything. And for that decade, we learned and we got stung and we kind of reversed course. I'm realizing now that I think estrogen is just a little too much in vogue. Estrogen, progesterone, even bioidentical hormone replacement. And this notion of just staying on it indefinitely your whole life, I'm not on board with that. Now, if we start seeing some studies come out and we start seeing, more and more research, and there's more and more experience with those people who are doing that behind us, it's not going to be me, I can tell you that. My view is just to be a little more humble about this. So I am still using the patch. I am still using it, the micronized progesterone, because I do have my uterus, and that has to offset the effects of the estrogen, and they're both bioidentical. And again, for the estrogen, it is a transdermal patch, so it does bypass my liver. I have gone up to the 0.0375. I started with the 0.025. I might go back down, and I don't think I'm going to do this for more than a year. I think what I'm doing is I'm putting my foot very heavy on the gas in terms of getting the bone loss to halt. But then I'm going to want to see how I do with all of the other things I have in place, minus the added estrogen. Because again, whenever I go off the patch, I'm going to have bone loss. And it seems that we just don't know. I'm not so sure this is totally benign. Now, to be clear, my family history is concerning. My mother had breast cancer. I think my grandmother had breast cancer. I don't know. They're both deceased. So that is a consideration. And when I heard this Dr. McCann speak, who was one of the principal investigators in the Women's Health Initiative study, and when she was interviewed by Dr. Attia, she said that the only thing she thinks that was overcalled and that is almost indisputably safe is the use of hormone replacement therapy for women who are having very bothersome symptoms of menopause, like poor sleep, hot flashes, the vasomotor symptoms, and things like that, early on, starting it early in their 50s, where the overall absolute risk of things like cancers and all the other things that you think of that are risks with hormone replacements is exceedingly low. The other thing is that the risks of these hormones in people in their 70s, albeit different preparations they were using at that time in the Women's Health Initiative, proved to be hands down dangerous. And it's the group in between where I fall. So I'm pushing 60. I'm going to be 60 in just about a month, a little over a month. And so I'm not in the 50 to 59 group. On the other hand, most people 50 to 59 most of the people in that group are going to be a few years out of menopause, because I think the average age for menopause is 51. I am within 5 years of menopause still, not 10. So a lot of women my age, you put them in the group 10 years post-menopause. So I don't know if they could go back and look at that study and instead of separating them by age, separate them by how many years post-menopause. I think that's probably shielding me some from some of the risk, but I'm not going to know. So all this is to say that I have learned over the years, and I'm just learning it again, to be measured and scrutinizing about anything that seems to be kind of in vogue or an overcorrection in the field of medicine. So, a decade ago, no hormones. Now, hey, hormones for everybody, no issues, no risks. Not true. So I'm going to keep you guys posted. So far, I just put on the higher dose patch, the 0.0375. My nurse practitioner felt that the 0.025 really wasn't going to have any impact at all. I actually beg to differ. The small studies I've seen with the impact on osteoporosis, it looks like it will, but it just takes longer. So I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to be on the medicine, let me be on the medicine, and I'll try the 0.0375. Now, I'm going to monitor for symptoms. I just went up to that dose. So, if I notice that more density in the breasts, that is actually strongly correlated with a risk of breast cancer. So if I notice that starts happening, I'm going to come off of it. I've just had a normal mammogram. So if something does come up, I'll know, you don't grow cancer overnight. So this was a good starting point for the hormones. But more importantly, I'm very eager to get to my next DEXA scan, which would be in December of 25, so December of this year. Maybe I'll wait till January, and see if that shows any change, and then make a decision. I think if I get any positive change at all, which would mean either the bone loss is halted, or if I'm really lucky, I'll get a little bit of added density. That's a lot to ask, but in that case, I think I'll taper down and come off of the hormones, because I don't really know what the end point is. I guess that's the issue with using these things for osteoporosis. It's not really clear what the end point is, and if you have some family history of breast cancer, it does become a more nuanced risk assessment. And as Dr. McCann put it, even the anxiety of thinking about that all the time, because you have this strong family history, that becomes a quality of life issue as well. So for right now, on the patch, moving forward with the hormone replacement, having just had a normal mammogram, and I'll keep you guys posted. Let me know what your thoughts are. Take care.